Okay, recording is happening. So let's go back to my program, and who knows what's going to happen when we try to track down this issue. Okay, so I'm in the right directory. Oh. All right. Hey, Nick, I see you're here. So in this room here, I'm going through the sample problem that's similar to program 2. Oh, okay, I guess everyone's coming back here. But there are also the breakout rooms available if you just wanted to work on stuff and not listen to me. Yeah, so where we got to before, I'll share my screen, is, okay, oh, okay. I'll keep the chat up here so that I don't miss things. Close that, okay. Okay. So I'm getting a segmentation fault right now. So I can keep trying to make this work. Oh, I didn't want to look at that. I wanted to look at vim may 27.c. Okay. So one thing I notice is I'm not getting a segmentation fault when, oops, that's the wrong one. When I only go this far, but I am when I go farther. And I wasn't before I was actually getting my class name in here. So I guess, I mean, I'll just kind of talk through my thinking as I try to track this down. Oh, I guess, well, I said that we were gonna just see that it worked, and then we could develop our function to print out. I wonder if, no, the fact that this class name pointer is local. No, it's should be copying in. Okay, let's try to develop a function that will print out my struct, because something's going wrong when I'm trying to put in name. So maybe printing out my structs will help me. So I'm going to do print, and also feel free to jump in if you have questions or thoughts, but I'll just try to chug along to track this down. So say I want a function to print a course. So this is going to take in a course T, which is the struct that I defined to hold my course info. So now let me actually define this function. So I've got a course T, I gotta name it. I'll call it course. And I want to print the course ID and the course name. So to access those, I'm going to use my dot notation, but course ID, and that is an integer. So I'll use my integer placeholder, and my course name is a string. So I'll use my string placeholder, and then I need to pass in course dot, what did I call it? Let's go back to the top. I called it course number and course name. And I also have course dot name. Course dot, I think it's course name. Oh yeah, course name. And it's not just number, it is actually, why? I'm just gonna make this on 2 lines for readability purposes. It's course.course number and course.course name. Okay. Oh, and then let's actually call this. So as soon as I create this, I want to well, yeah, let's do it. So I want to print course, and I want to pass in courses at I, right? So I think potentially my issue here is that I didn't put in a size here. So we said that our buff was size 100. I'm going to call this line size and make it into a constant. And then I need to define it. And I'm going to make it 100. And now I don't have this whole like flexible array thing it's yelling at me about. Oh, no, I do. Oh, I didn't, okay. So this is what I meant to change. So I don't want this. I think it's thinking that I'm trying to use some fancy thing called a flexible array, but I don't want that. I want this to be an array of size, line size. Okay, so that's going to help. Okay, so it looks like that's working a little bit for us. I wonder if that will fix the segmentation fault error. So this is size, I think. Yeah. Okay, so that was, so we left off for, I think, Nick, you're the one who wasn't here. So we left off, we pretty much finished, does this have, yeah, we pretty much finished. We were trying to get through this first one here, but we had a segmentation fault. And so it turned out that, I believe at least, this was previously declared without a size. And so as we were actually assigning things here, we ended up trying to access memory that we hadn't set, or for some reason we weren't allowed to access. So actually declaring your arrays with sizes is the lesson there. So let me, I don't need these anymore. And now it looks like I am building my struct. Cool, so let me pause here. And so we've now, I would say, finished this problem 1. Does anyone who's here have any questions or have anything they want me to go over regarding that, what we've done so far? I guess maybe I'll specifically, let's see. So weird for it to break on compilers when almost all the other course names have more characters. Oh, yeah. So I agree, Mark. I wish, so I can speculate on why, well, yeah, I mean, I think we can say that it's not about the fact that, like, when I didn't put a size in, it's not that they were overflowing. Well, yeah. Well, I guess I don't know what it was. It sounds like there's this flexible array type, and it was trying to use that. And so at least my understanding, one of the hard parts about the fact that we can assign things to memory locations that we shouldn't is that sometimes, even if we haven't allocated that memory to ourselves, it's still going to work for us to access it. But other times, that memory is being used by something else, and then it's not okay for us to access it. I think, like, that's why some people in the beginning of class were getting away with putting in, just declaring an int, and assuming it was going to be 0. And sometimes that works until it doesn't, because sometimes nothing was in that memory location, but then you run your program another time and something actually is in that memory location, or yeah. So a lot of weirdness, and it would be interesting to dig in more, but I think for our purposes, we should just go ahead and move on. Ooh, I think there's another chat. Yes. Yeah. Glad we're on the same page. So I'll just ask, Nick, do you have any questions before we move on? Or do you think you'll just pick it up as we go with the next task, since you missed the previous one? Cool, thanks. Okay, so part 2 is that we want to let the user input a course number, and we want to print out all the courses that have that course number or higher. And so I guess another thing, if we had more time, we might want to improve this program. Maybe I'll put this sort of at the top. Potential to do would be, don't assume that the file has 15 lines. And so then I might use a while loop with my fgets. But I think that's just considered an ungraded sort of bonus for this assignment. So you won't get any extra points for doing that, but you are welcome to, and it would be a good exercise. But so now we want our user to be able to input a course ID. So we've got our nice organized main here already. And so maybe get course ID from user and print courses. Did we say less? course number or higher. Greater than or equal. So I think it would probably be nice to just do this in its own function. So maybe I'll call it user interaction, with sort of the idea that in your own program too, you could extend this to do all the user interaction. So I'm going to need in user interaction access to my structs. So I'm going to pass in courses. And indeed, I have not defined it yet. So I'll make myself first a function prototype. It's going to take in something of type course T. Let's see. Why did this work here? Oh, it's an array of all of them, huh? Okay, I want all of them, huh? I don't just want one course T, I want an array of course Ts. So now, all right, so this is going to do all that stuff. I need to get an int from the user, and then I need to print all courses with IDs greater than or equal. So since we have done this a bunch of times, I'll just do this without asking you to help me. So I need an int course ID, and I'm going to use scanf to get this from the user. I might actually have an issue with this. If I know sometimes scanf just kind of does weird things, but we'll just try and we can fix it if it's not allowing us to get input. And then, so since course ID is an int, I need to pass in a pointer to the int. If course ID had been a string, then I don't need that ampersand. But it's not a string, it's an int. Okay, at this point, I would probably just print myself user entered. I just like to really make sure that I haven't made any mistakes yet, so. And I don't need to print my courses anymore. So I'm going to take that out. Oh, and I probably want to prompt the person, don't I? So enter a course ID. I've gotten in the habit of doing a write because I know that Vim will tell me some of the compiler errors or warnings. Okay, let's say I enter 107, user entered 107. Great, so I'm reading it in. That's good news. Okay, so now I have it. So any ideas for, like, how am I going to print all the courses with IDs greater than or equal to course ID? Any ideas? You can put it in the chat. You can unmute yourself. What's the big idea that I'm gonna have to do? Like, what's the scheme, the strategy? Anyone? Ooh. This is more advanced than I was thinking. So sorting the courses by number and then find the index that the number lies on, and now I know I can do everything above that. That is actually a really good idea, and I didn't even think of sorting it. I was just going to walk over the whole thing. So maybe for the sake of time, we'll do my not very advanced way, and if we have time, we can start in on the sorting. So my idea was just to loop over all courses, then print the ones with that satisfy that, right? So if I want to loop over them, okay, actually I don't need to take in size because it's a constant. But if I have a better program that doesn't assume the number of rows in the file, then I would need to pass that in, but I don't need to. So I can say for int I equals 0, I less than size, and plus I just need to check that course ID is in the struct. So to make this check, I guess I'm going to say if something, and if that thing is true, then I already have my print course function, so that's exciting. And then I'm going to need to pass something in there. So anyone want to tell me what either the code that I could put in here or the idea behind the code that I should put in here? Nice. Okay, so courses at I. Nice. So that's how I'm getting to the struct that I want. And I have greater than or equal to course ID. So this, now I am getting told that the thing on the left is of type course T and the thing on the right is of type int. So what do I need to do to add to actually get the int that I want? Yeah, course number. Perfect. Yeah, easy to forget those. Pretty sure I did it earlier. And then, so we already saw that courses at I is that course T that we need, right? So then I can just, that's what I want to print out. So, and I need a semicolon. So let's test it and see what we get. Okay, enter course ID. Let's say I want all the 400 level courses. And it looks like it's working. Let's try one more time. Let's say I want all the courses, so I'll start at 100, and that looks like it's working. Oh, so one thing I could note is that they're actually already sorted. So I could potentially use that if I wanted to be clever. Let's see, it's 1:15. I am gonna run to the bathroom, but we can keep going and maybe either think about sorting this, which would be useful for a little help on lab 4, or we can get that our while loop working for the not knowing how many lines are in the file. But I'm gonna have us come back. So it's 1:16 right now. Let's come back at 1:20 for another 15 minutes together if we want it. But I'm gonna use the bathroom. So I'll be back. See y'all at 1:20. Aha, it's 1:20. Okay, so there are just 3 of you. So wanna just put in the chat if you wanna do sort the array or the other choice would be read in unknown number of lines. So just put in the chat if you'd rather spend our last 15 minutes sorting or reading in an unknown number of lines. Got one no. Oh, okay. Well, it looks like we have a verdict. Majority says unknown number of lines. Okay. So, great. We're going to have to start off. Maybe let's get to our main. So maybe for now, let's actually not call user interactions because we're going to need to pass in the number of lines there. So that way we won't get any errors as we start. So to start off, just go ahead and delete this. See if we're, okay, so we're gonna need to pass it in. We'll just say int size here. And so this is gonna be that int size, right? And this doesn't match. So I would need to change my function prototype in user interaction. Now it takes in an int, and so first I'm going to have to get that size, which maybe this makes my program a little more complicated. So I'm going to have to, I'll declare it. So maybe I am going to thinking about whether I'm going to need to first read this in to just, if I don't know how many lines there are going to be, if I first need to read in an array of strings, one for each line, or if I can get away with not doing that. If anyone can think of how if I can get away with not doing that, you can speak up. But for now, I'm going to assume that I actually need to create also an array of strings that are the lines, and then I'll sort of parse them later. So let's see. Or, oh, no. Okay, the thing I can do is I can just make it, I can make an assumption about, let's say I assume that my max lines is something like 50. So then I can actually just make this, I'm going to get my declare variable for number of lines. But when I first declare my array of structs, I can just use this max lines. And then I'm only gonna, my size will keep track of how many did I actually put in. So as I actually read them, I have some options. I could have this return to me the size, or I could actually pass in a pointer to my size variable and still have it return, just have it return void, but I would be passing by reference. So any change, if I make a change by dereferencing this pointer, then it'll actually be changed in my main function. Does that make sense? The idea that I could pass this in by reference? Let me know if there are questions. Get the chat back up. So you don't have to do this. Like you could return it. You could return size, but maybe just for illustration's sake, I will pass it in by reference. So read courses now takes a pointer to an integer. So maybe I'll name it again up here. And read courses. Do I have a read courses, conflicting type? Indeed, because now I'm passing in a pointer to an integer. So this is no longer going to be a for loop, right? I guess it can still be a loop. Maybe I'll just uncomment. I'll comment this out. So I don't have my I yet, but does anyone have thoughts on how I can start here? I can think of, there are a couple different ways I can do it. So if anyone has one way in mind, maybe we can go with that. So let's say I wanted to use a while loop. And let's say I still want to use fgets. So the thing about fgets, and we looked it up before, is if it doesn't get anything, it will give me a null pointer. It will return a null pointer. So I think I can actually move this into my while loop. And I can say, as long as this thing is not null, because if it succeeded, there was a line there, then buff will have the line. And if it didn't succeed, it was null, well, I should stop. I shouldn't continue processing. I say I think because we should test it out and see if this is going to work for us. So it looks like we don't have an I, which makes sense because we only had an I because our for loop. So now I'm also going to need declare integer to keep track of the size of array, right? Which is the number of lines. So let's say I just call it I, and I need it to start at 0. So now I have my I. I'm trying to think if there's anything that would be wrong here. Well, I can think of one thing. So this now, so I haven't actually I haven't set size yet, right? Does anybody know how I would actually do that inside this function? Like say, I know my I is going to go up to however many I read. So what would I do to actually set size? You can either tell me the code for it or sort of what's the idea that I'm going to need to do. Or you could say, I don't know. Okay, here's an easier one. How about so I can't do, okay, my return type is void. So I can't do something like return I and like set that to size, like have, this would be kind of the other way to do it, right? I could return size, but I've defined read courses to not return anything. So I'm gonna have to do something else. I see something in the chat. Or wait, do I? Maybe someone just joined the, no, someone just joined the breakout room. Okay, so I'm not doing it. I've chosen not to return size. So I can't return I, but I is my size. So how do I get my main to know the correct size? Any ideas? I guess a hint would be, if you remember the classwork from Monday, we did something. We passed by reference, which is what we're doing here, taking in a pointer to size. I can't return it. Got to do something else. So I've got I. What do I need to set to be I? Anyone? I'd also accept wrong answers. You can tell me what can't I set to I? What isn't going to work if I set it to I? Or you could also make a suggestion of for the readability of my code. I just realized I would say that to make this more readable, I would call this size pointer, right? Because I'm not passing in size, I'm passing in a pointer to size. So that's a hint. What should I put on the left side of this assignment operator? Something to do with size pointer. No ideas? So I can't, if I did this, does anybody know what like in words, what would this be doing? So this would set, or I guess would set size pointer to I, right? But size pointer should be a memory address. So what I need to do, not this, comment this out. what I need to do is I need to set whatever size pointer points to, which is size, to I. Now let's see. Let's see. I think we're over time. So we could do something like just see if this compiles and runs. We're not going to see anything. But that is how we would start that. I think it's working, but I do want to respect your time. So to actually use a size. Reading in the data. So I guess, Mark, to answer your question, what I'm thinking of, and you definitely could be making a good point, I'm thinking we have allocated just extra memory. So we did allocate the memory, but we just assumed that there were at least 50 lines. Does that make sense? You're probably right that we could do something more efficient, but we haven't learned about dynamic memory allocation yet. So this would be one way that we could do it, knowing what we know so far. Does that make sense? I guess I don't know. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that if we do something like, if we now iterate through I less than size, I'm thinking if we iterate through courses, I need to print courses at I. I'm thinking this will just go, I forgot why. Oh, okay, well, this is good. It looks like we didn't. Maybe we're not done yet. So it looks like our while loop is not actually going. So maybe I would do something to try to figure this out. I might do something like print out. So maybe I'll save this. So I'm going to save the result of fgets. Yeah. So to answer your question, Mark, it's probably going to look funny in the recording because nobody can see. I think the recording won't be able to see the chat, but the question was about how are we using size? And I think the answer is I've just allocated a bunch. I've allocated more than I'm going to need in my array. And then size is just keeping track of how far should I go when I iterate over it. But I think that I found that my while loop actually doesn't work here, which makes sense because, you know, one makes mistakes. So in order to debug that, and by the way, yeah, you can stay on, but for the sake of anyone that might be watching the recording, I will talk through how would I debug that. But if you're still here and it's past class time, you can leave if you want. So I'm going to actually try to understand what fgets is returning to me. So I can make a pointer to, so fgets does return me I believe it should be a pointer to a character. So I'm going to call this status. And this is going to be to hold results of fgets, I guess. So since it doesn't look to me like this is going at all, I'll just try just doing 1. So I still want to call fgets. The thing that I write to is buff. I'm saying the max bytes or characters that I want to read is line size, and file is where I'm reading from. Now I'm just going to try a printf on status. And I think that I should read in a new line, character at the end there, so I don't need a new line. And I'm also going to print out what buff is, because I think that they actually should be the same thing in this case, if I were to successfully read a line. Yeah, okay, this is what I thought. So then I'm not sure why. I mean, maybe I am not successfully setting size. That could be the other option. So it looks like my fgets, what I thought fgets was doing was correct. So maybe I'll comment this out so that I don't have too much confusing stuff going on. So now I'm going to print, okay, I'll already have it. I'm going to print, so I thought maybe I wasn't going through this while loop at all. I'll copy this from here. But to check that I'm actually am going through it, I just want, like, okay, there we go. I'll print things. Okay, we are going through it. It looks like maybe we're not setting size correctly. So, okay, to check that I'm setting size correctly, I will, after reading courses, sizes, and that's a int. Okay, my attempt to demonstrate passing by reference seems to have failed. So let's see what I is. I is I is 0. Okay. Well, classic while loop forgot to increment I, right? So that didn't work because I set I to 0, but I never incremented it. So we don't need to print this anymore. Hopefully now I will actually go through that. Yeah. So I was forgetting to increment I, and that's why when I tried to print, I didn't print anything because I was 0. So now let's just do an example. Oh, I guess to prove to ourselves that this worked, I'm going to look at what's my classes.csv. So I'm no longer assuming this is 15 long, so I'm going to just delete a couple here. Quick way to check. Now let's see if I just rerun, we only have 13. So we now don't make any assumptions about, well, we assume that there's no more than we assumed that there were no more than 50 lines, but we didn't assume exactly how many lines there were. So thanks for sticking around and your participation. And that would be the end. And yeah, if there are any questions, I can take those now. Otherwise, I will end the call and I'll try to get the recording up. Oh, thanks, Mark. So Mark notes that in the while loop, we can remove the check that f gets is, why did that enter n? Okay. So yeah, that's a good call. So I don't have to check that this isn't equal to null. So it's like, if it was null, then this would get treated as false. So f gets will return me null if there is no line. Null evaluates to false in the while condition. So maybe I'll do that and we'll make that change and we'll compile and run. And it looks like it's still working. So yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, and I guess, okay, even better comment here would be null evaluates to false in the while condition. Anything else evaluates to true. So, great. Okay, any last questions or comments? All right, I will stop my share. I will